and whatnot. So I just did the whole thing, and after a while, you would forget, and the dogs would be barking in the middle of the night, or you have to get up and go to the bathroom and what have you. And it became apparent to me that even for someone who was really motivated like myself and had a rather simple one-story home, I didn't have to navigate basement stairs and whatnot, that it just wasn't really, really sustainable. I met and married my current husband about 4 or 5 years ago, and he kind of thought, he scratched my head. He has a background in electronics and industrial control and whatnot, and he thought I was an unusual person to be doing that, and because of his background in electronics, he just wasn't aware of these problems. But nonetheless, he got on board, and ultimately, kind of as a honey-do project, he created a remote switch so that we can, from our bedroom, just cut off the circuits. Because really what you have to do is you have to mitigate these EMFs, the ones that you can, when you can, and where you can. So what, when, and where. You may not be able to control some aspects of, the radio frequency exposure. You may not be able to fully shield your smart meter. You may not be able to fully take care of some magnetic field off of some nearby appliance, but you try to hit all the points that you can, because some mitigation is better than none by a long stretch. So we have that product that we have just really started marketing here in the past few months, and we're trying to help as many people as we can, and trying to make it where it's easy to do, because it has to integrate in your bedtime routine. It can't be too difficult. And people really need to get on this, because this is a big problem.
I agree. I think, like you said, there's so much research on this, and I'm so glad when I found you guys at PaleoFX, I was so excited, because I had been trying to figure out the same type thing and turning off circuit breakers and which ones to turn off, and it's not a sustainable thing, and then you forget to do it. So it's kind of like the idea of having the timer on the Wi-Fi or a remote or something. Like, you may not remember to do it every night, or people at different times. And so now we're using what you created, which is called the EMF kill switch, in our house. And it's so much easier. And so I'd love if you could give us an explanation of kind of basically what it is and how it works. And also, when you get one of these, how you need to talk to an electrician or whoever's installing it. Because like I said, I think that's an area that not a lot of them are familiar with necessarily. I was lucky that my dad is very well versed in this, but I know not everyone has a dad who can install an EMF kill switch. So can you talk about that implementation process?
Sure. So the kill switch is basically an accessory electrical panel that you mount next to your main electrical panel. Like I said, that's typically in the garage or basement. And this little panel, it's about a foot by foot square. It has a big metal cord that then connects over to your main panel. And your electrician doesn't even have to get into the guts of what we call the EMF kill switch, which is this little accessory panel. But he just hooks up the wires that come out of there in a pretty straightforward way that's very well outlined with good instructions. And he hooks them up to the circuits that you have determined needed to be cut off at nighttime to bring your body voltage as low as possible. And you have to go through that body voltage testing process, like I briefly talked about earlier, where you're holding on to a lead and you're testing your body voltage in your room. But this time, instead of moving closer to the wall to see your body voltage go up and moving away and seeing your body voltage drop, you end up turning off different circuits and seeing which ones are in the walls surrounding your sleeping area and need to be turned off. For example, if your bedroom is up against a study and there's a common wall, then you probably are also going to have to turn off the electricity most of the electricity in the room that goes to the study, because those wires are running in a common wall. Luckily, in most homes, bedrooms are kind of grouped, and you can take care of more than one bedroom, and you won't have to interfere with other areas that have to be lit up for people who stay up later. That may or may not be an issue, but you kind of have to go through a process where you kind of figure it out. It's not really hard. It takes some time. It takes two people, one person out at the breaker box turning off circuits and the other person in the house, recording measurements. And it's an hour-long process, and it's you'll find out which circuits are affecting your sleeping area. And basically, you put little tags on those circuit breakers, and then your electrician comes in and he interfaces those circuits with our accessory control box. And then once those are hooked up from your bedroom, you have a little remote key, a little key fob, just like you open your car with. And when you go to bed at night, you just hit the little button there. If you need electricity in the middle of the night, you hit it again. And once again, in the morning, you turn everything on, right there from your bedroom. There's no running around and doing things. So it's pretty handy. We've had ours going for a year, and I can definitely tell that I have better sleep. Every once in a while, we completely forget to turn it off, and I'll wake up and I'll be like, yep, that was, it's kind of reassuring to actually have a bad night and see why, and it's been so helpful to me that I'm really trying to get the word out and have other people get on board with this as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I recorded some just very rough video when we were installing ours, kind of showing the process and the voltage meter and all that. So as soon as I have time to edit it, hopefully before this podcast airs, I'll make sure to link to it. But I'll publish that just to kind of show, because it really is not a difficult process to install. It was easier than I expected. It does take a little bit of time, but it isn't hard. And I think you've given such a good medical and scientific explanation for why we need to tackle this topic and why it's so important, especially for those of us who have kids in our house. And I feel like from a mom's perspective, and certainly where I was when I first started researching this, it can be so overwhelming, and you can get into that analysis paralysis. And I hear it from people all the time, well, everything's going to kill us, so I might as well just not do anything. And so I'd love to hear, kind of as we start to get toward the end, if you could just wrap up by explaining why, you've made such a good case, but why we need to put this into action, and why even baby steps are so important to get started, and where you'd recommend starting.
Sure. So analysis paralysis, Katie, I see that a lot in my practice too. People will say, I want to research that, or, I want to take time and before I put it in action, really learn about it. And basically what happens when people tell me that, I think, oh no, they're going to do nothing. And that's kind of what happens. And we certainly see that, across the board. When people get overwhelmed, that's kind of a big response. And that's what I'm trying to, I try not to overwhelm people. I probably overwhelm people here with a lot of this data and everything. But I think the real takeaways are that there are solutions for living with our technology, far short of becoming a Luddite and living in a cave or a tent like you alluded to. You really have to be you and your family's advocate for health in regard, in many areas, in my opinion, but especially in something like this. I guarantee you, your doctor has had no training. You may have an informed doctor, and you could speak with them about it, but you're going to have to educate yourself, try not to get overwhelmed, the analysis paralysis, and take some form of action and then build off of that. It is highly unlikely that you're going to do anything wrong that can hurt yourself. So don't be afraid of mistakes. Just keep learning about this and implementing small changes, maybe an occasional big change. Keep working on your children so they're not technology addicted. I have people that don't want to do this because they're afraid of their teenagers' revolt, about not having the Wi-Fi on until 2 a.m. or something like that. You're going to need to make these stands, and some are going to be harder than others. But I just think it's so important. I think it's such a big health issue.
I agree. And like you, I think we're going to see only more and more, unfortunately, of this unless we tackle it, and more in the literature. And just, this is such a growing topic. And I think you're doing an excellent job, both in your practice and places like now, explaining it and getting the word out. And that would be my encouragement to other women and moms as well, or anyone listening, is to just start making the baby steps and see, because I know firsthand, and I have close friends, I've all had the same experience. You sleep so much better. There is a difference, and it's especially the differences we can't see, that over time, the kids hopefully not developing these problems and protecting their DNA as they grow and protecting those voltage gated bumps that you talked about, things we can't immediately measure, but that are going to have such a big impact on their lives going forward. So I love that you're spreading the word about this. And another question I love to ask as we wrap up is if there's a favorite book that's really had an impact on you or changed your life in some way that you would recommend.
Well, good question. About 10 or 12 years ago, this is really off topic, but I read Michael Pollan's The Omnivore's Dilemma. It's about, have you read that book, Katie?
I have, yeah.
Yeah. So, it's about taking kind of a different look at, what it means to be a human and being able to eat anything, but maybe not anything and everything is good for you. And I think that kind of was the beginning of my thinking a little bit differently. It was very eye-opening for me. And that sparked my movement into the ancestral sort of movement on food and light and everything. So that was a huge book for me.
Yeah, such a good book. And I love his quote about eat real food, not too much, mostly plants. I think that's one thing off topic as well, but I think so much of our arguments in the ancestral health world or the health world in general about what type of exact diet is best. And like at the end of the day, we agree on 90% of stuff. And all of us would say that vegetables are important and good and that we need clean proteins, whatever that means. And I think if we focused on what we agree on and eating more healthy plant sources, even those of us who eat meat, that we would go a long way towards getting a lot healthier. But I love that book.
Yeah, it's about, eat real foods. Nature is the ultimate standard here. It's our standard in food for organic and non-GMO. It's our standard for air and water quality, And I think, it needs to be with our exposure to EMR. We need to think about what is more of a natural sort of condition. We don't need to give up our technology, but I think we need to make very thoughtful and careful choices.
I agree. And lastly, if there's a piece of advice that you could spread far and wide, I know you've spread a lot of great advice in this interview, but that you could just pass on to a lot of people, what would it be and why?
Well, I think it goes back to those solutions exist and don't get overwhelmed. Take baby steps. It's what inside of your home is what counts the most. This is what building biologists talk about. Everybody gets that overwhelmed. Oh my gosh, Google's putting up balloons and my neighbor has, 18 routers sort of a feeling and they just kind of shut down. And that's what I don't want to see happen. I want people to try to change their own personal environments and improve their own and their family's health.
I love it. 100% agree with you. And I know we've talked about a lot of different things. All the links to those will be in the show notes, especially the link to the EMF kill switch that I have installed in my house and hopefully the video of how I did it if it's ready to go by then. And those are all at wellnessmama.fm. So if you're driving or running or whatever you do while you listen to podcasts, don't worry about writing it down. Just check out this episode there. And Dr. Amy, I appreciate you so much, your time. I know that you are busy both as a pediatrician and trying to get the word out about EMFs. And it means a lot that you took time to be here and to explain this today. And I'm very appreciative.
I had so much fun, Katie. And everybody's start learning and start implementing.
Absolutely. And like I said, I'll have some springboard links for them to keep researching more and links to the kill switch in the show notes. You guys can check those out. And thanks to all of you, of course, for listening. And I hope to see you again next time on the Healthy Moms Podcast. If you're enjoying these interviews, would you please take 2 minutes to leave a rating or review on iTunes for me? Doing this helps more people to find the podcast, which means even more moms and families can benefit from the information. I really appreciate your time, and thanks as always for listening.